Well, hello there. Welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and I'm so doggone glad you're here. Is now the best time to change your brand story? Maybe, maybe not. Perhaps given all of the chaos we've experienced over the year of COVID, consistency is what your customers may want out of you. But you've got to make that call because it's all about designing for trust in your brand storytelling. Today, we'll explore the 4 V's of brand storytelling, including voice, volume, vulnerability, and values, with our guest, author of the new book, Trustworthy: How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap, Margot Bloomstein.
The smartest organizations are the ones that are able to put a stake in the ground, say what's important to them, make their values visible, and then act as a beacon to other organizations to say how they're going to continue to evolve, to make good on those values.
Margo is one of the most prominent voices in the content strategy industry. She is the principal of Appropriate Inc., a brand and content strategy consultancy. As a speaker and strategic advisor, she has worked with marketing teams in a range of organizations over the past 2 decades. The creator of Brand Sort, she developed a popular message architecture-driven approach to content strategy. Margo lectures around the world about brand-driven content strategy and designing for trust. Please welcome to the Business of Story, Margot Bloomstein. Margo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Where are you coming to us from?
Well, my here, quote unquote, is the Boston burbs, so a bit west of Boston.
Bit west of how was St. Patty's Day out there this year?
A little bit quieter than normal, but that's okay. I think that's as it should be. I think we're all kind of figuring out how to maintain our energy, maintain our outlooks with hopefully the end in sight for this place that we've all been in, this time that we've all been in, and that's good. We're conserving energy for what comes next when we can again all gather and raise a glass together.
Well, and hopefully it was a little bit more boisterous than last year, because I would imagine it was totally shut down last year.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good. So there's hope. There's progress.
Yes,
So,
yeah, I think we're seeing that all on the horizon.
yeah. Margo, what main story problem are we going to solve for our listeners today?
I think we're going to solve the problem of how we prioritize trust. I was gonna say we're going to solve the problem of trust and cynicism, but that's a big problem facing our society, facing all of us right now. We're not gonna solve that today, but I think we will all learn how to gain the tools to solve it bit by bit through the work that we all do every day. It's everybody's problem, so it's everybody's responsibility to try to solve.
When you say prioritize trust, you mean put that right at the top of our strategy document. How are we going to build more trust with our customers, with our audiences, with our colleagues, and with the communities we serve?
Yes, all of that, and I'd say both are if you work in a company, I'm speaking to how you build trust with your external audiences, maybe prospective clients and customers and prospective new recruits and the folks that you hope to hire into that company, as well as internal audiences, maybe the colleagues with whom you already work, the teams that you lead or the teams that you support, how we maintain trust internally as well. I think we need to prioritize that effort because there have been so many forces looking to destabilize our trust in each other, in our society, in big institutions, in previous sources of expertise, in ourselves. I think we've been kind of fighting that battle for several years, whether we've known it or not. And I think that now we do need to prioritize how do we counter that. There have been so many investments in our cynicism and stoking our cynicism and fear of each other that now I think we need to address that, acknowledge that problem and say if we've lost trust in previous sources of expertise, if we've lost trust in government and big institutions and big business, if we've kind of replaced those sources of expertise by instead turning to the people around us, maybe people just like us, build up those filter bubbles, only to realize that those filter bubbles, folks that we thought were just like us, are really just about the algorithms that are kind of feeding us advertising and telling us, read this story next, buy this product. Here's what was popular among your friends. Then we realize, nah, there's a lot of ways that Facebook and Yelp and hotels.com game those algorithms. Well, that's when people start to turn inward and saying, well, if I can't trust anybody else, I'll just go with my gut. If it feels right, it probably is right. And I think if you're in a position of engaging with other people, maybe through marketing, if you're attempting to persuade them, sell them on an idea or a service or a product, anything that you do like that depends on sharing your expertise and speaking from a position of authority. And unless your audience can trust you, unless they can also trust themselves and their ability to make good decisions based on the information they consume, then you can't move forward. You might as well be wasting all your money there. You're undermining the success, the
Mhm.
potential success of any marketing if you don't have your audience's trust. So I think we need to look at how we regain that, how we prioritize efforts to regain that, because unless we start there, we're done before we've even begun.
Yeah. And trust has been in decline in consumers and communities for decades. I think, people really stopped trusting big businesses who you used to go to work for your entire career and spend 30 years there and leave, 40 years there and leave with, a retirement plan. People get cut loose all the time. The environmental impacts big business has had over the years has really eroded trust. And it feels like to me, given the last 4 years, and this is not a political statement, but just what we have seen happening in Washington, D.C., and granted, DC never had a lot of trust going for it in the
Mm.
first place. But when the Trump administration and the cronies around them came out with all the misinformation, the fake news, the alternative facts, boy, it sure seems to me like it dumped trust in the garbage bin. And I think it's very natural then for people to turn to their friends, turn to their families, turn to people that they admire, that they feel like there's some modicum of trust there. Even look at the vaccine thing going on right now. So many people in the world do not trust the vaccines, and you can't blame them because of all the things that led up to it. So that's just one like really dramatic example of the lack of trust. But you and I and all the businesses and clients that we work with and the brands we work with out there almost feel like, especially with a new customer, if you're showing up, they are distrusting you first and foremost, like prove it to me.
Right.
I want to like you. I want to believe you. I want to buy into your values you're espousing, but I've been lied to so often. What makes you any different than anybody else?
Right, right. And we live in this state of saying, "Prove it." Everybody's out to get you, all politicians lie, you're no different, you're no better, and and that's a state of cynicism. And as you said, I don't know that you can really blame anybody for being cynical because we have so many reasons to be cynical. I mean, maybe the politicians or the institutions that you used to trust have played fast and loose with the truth, and I think we saw that over the past several years on both sides of the aisle, to be fair.
Yep.
But then also maybe the newspaper that you grew up reading, or the brands that where you've always kinda spent your money without questioning, have also become inconsistent. Maybe they've relaunched with a new tone of voice, or new budgets around how they invest in cultivating and developing the news and telling stories. And when that starts to change, when the organizations that you thought you knew are now saying, "You don't know us, you can't trust us," that's really destabilizing, and I think people adopt that mantle of cynicism of saying you can't trust anyone as kind of a means of protection. But the danger in that is that cynics wall themselves off from new information. They put up a wall that says everyone lies, so I'm not going to take in information from anyone
It's a
anymore.
survival instinct.
Right, right. When instead, what can actually help us survive and thrive is not cynicism, but skepticism. To say, all right, I won't take things just on face value. Let me do more research. Let me gather more information from high quality sources, not just what somebody I went to school with is now posting up about vaccines, somebody that I know blew off science class all through high school anyhow, but now has strong opinions that are masquerading as facts. um, that's
But
not high
but
quality research,
the
but
very
that's
thing
what kind
about
of
that,
hires
though,
are. What's that?
yeah, I mean, in this day and age, let's just take the vaccine again. If you are a non-vaxxer, you can go and find all the information you want on why you shouldn't be taking the vaccine. If you're pro-vaccination, then you can find all the information you want to back up that position too. So we are working in these silos. And then add to that the tech giants that have eroded our trust even more, by taking our information and sharing it with the world. And so you and I, and again, all of our clients fall under that same cynicism. I mean, we all get painted with that same distrustful brush until you can win people. And probably the most important point is deliver on the promises you make in your storytelling. And that's what we're here to talk about today is how can you build trust? In your experience, what have you seen? How do you build trust with storytelling?
One of the things that I write about in my new book, Trustworthy, I met with dozens of different organizations, different types of storytellers, CMOs, chief creative officers, copywriters, to talk with them about that. And one of the big themes that I saw was around consistency of message. And what you just said about delivering on your promise, I think that goes beyond just in the stories that we tell and the offers that we make verbally, but visually as well. And when brands change over time, when they're constantly reorganizing information in their site taxonomy, or when they're changing their look and feel and updating their logo every few months or every few years, that's jarring for their audiences. And I think especially now when we are in a time of such social and political upheaval, the best thing that brands can do to maintain trust, the best thing that, regardless of the size of your organization, whether you're kind of the team of one, the solopreneur, or you're representing a large Fortune 500, the best thing you can do is to stay the course in your messaging, in how you present your brand visually, as well as how you present it verbally in your tone of voice, so that your audience knows what to expect from you and they're not having to learn new jargon, kind of reset their eyes and their expectations every time they engage with you. I think that is the best thing that organizations can do right now. And I've had many conversations where folks are saying like, "Hey, we're thinking about a new website redesign or launching kind of this new brand." And my response to them always is, right now, don't. Don't introduce those changes. If anything, make what you're doing more consistent. Establish guidelines and guardrails for it. If you don't have editorial style guidelines, if you haven't ever worked with maybe your copywriters and your legal team to determine the right tone of voice for all your social media, now is the time to invest in that kind of governance and oversight so that if you have multiple people as storytellers within your organization, they can do so in a way that is consistent and cohesive, regardless of who they are or the specific role they play.
Margo, there's a huge niche out there right now, and it's one that has come to me, thankfully, that I've really been having a lot of fun working in. So over the decades, I've got 35 plus years in the branding and marketing world. Before I started, then I started Business of Story about 5 years ago. So I've created brands, I've redefined brands, I've done all of that branding work, but now brands are showing up to me saying, look at Park, we actually have a pretty good brand already. We had an agency do it for us, a couple of years ago. We're really happy with our brand. We just don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to share it with the world. And we are so unbelievably inconsistent that we feel like now that our brand work was all for naught because sales are saying this, marketing saying this, customer service is saying this, leadership is saying this, and we got to pull that together. So I guess it's speaking exactly to what you are talking about, is finding that consistent narrative and then delivering on it in every touch point in the stories you tell and how you deliver on those stories.
Right, right. And I think like when I work with organizations, one of the first things that I do, because some do say like, we already know our brand, we know who we are, we just need to figure out better content to use to tell that story. One of the first things I do is always to pull them back to say, well, what's your message architecture? What is that hierarchy of communication goals that will come out visually and verbally through all of your touch points? And until we can work together to articulate that so that they understand it and I understand it, I feel like we can't move forward with determining new content types or campaigns or even just how to kind of allocate their budget across different platforms. So I always start with them by helping them articulate that message architecture. And I do a few different exercises that I can facilitate with them. But the real value in it, I think, is getting all the different stakeholders in a room from many of the groups that you just mentioned, like someone from customer service, someone from the marketing team, the web development team, creative services, to all come together to say, all right, what is most important? Is it most important for us to tell a story of innovation or of tradition? Are we scrappy and creative, or are we more polished and erudite? Are we erudite, or are we educated, or are we smart? And what's the difference between those things? Because I think once we're able to articulate that for our internal purposes, then we're able to engage much more strategically with things like an editorial calendar and developing the right content types, or engaging with freelancers and agencies to determine what are the stories that we want to tell and in what way. That's what also allows us to establish those guardrails for what's in and what's out for our brand. What are the stories and the content types that are maybe more appropriate for a competitor, but we would just never want to have associated with us, because there are so many things that a marketer can do. And without kind of defining that sandbox of saying, here's what's in and here's what's out, here's what's appropriate for us and our current timelines and budgets and creative resources, and here's what's maybe orthogonal to that or distracting to that. Until we define those things, we can do everything. And activity is not always the same as progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen this, on a lot of different levels, this idea of trust and how quickly it can be eroded. I'm up here in Flagstaff now. We built a home, and a lot of my listeners know, they've heard me go through this because we've had a lot of Wi-Fi challenges up here. And I first tried HughesNet satellite, we can do this, we can give you this. Well, the latency was so ridiculous, I couldn't use it. So boom, right there, trust is all gone. I had that thing hanging off the side of my house for a week, pulled it down. Went to then cellular, and there's a company up here, I won't use their name, I'll just call them Revolting Wi-Fi at this point, because they showed up and said, oh, we can do this, and we get you plugged in here, and we're going to bounce it off the cell tower over by the Pinewood Fire Station. You'll be on the AT&T network, it'll be great and whatever. Well, none of it was. They put it up there, I was having nothing but problems, and so when I called them for customer service, it was like no customer service. And then they would like beat me up for not having good Wi-Fi, and they couldn't deliver on it. So I fought that for about 6 weeks. And then I went to Flagstaff IT, referred into a gentleman there, Brian, told him what was going on here, and I needed some cabling in the home, but could he help me with this? Within 24 hours, Brian had Terry call me to set up an appointment. Terry was this vivacious young lady, and she just knew her stuff. She said, Billy will be out at your house on Tuesday at 1:30. Billy showed up at 1:25. Billy was fantastic. He spent maybe 20 minutes here. Got it? Yep, this, that. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back. We're going to get you a quote, which I expect to get today, and then we can come in next week and get all this stuff dialed in. And the difference, I immediately texted Brian and say, your people are excellent. They're superb. They followed up. They were nice. They were knowledgeable. They got in, they got out, and I feel like I'm in good hands. I have complete, utter trust in them now. And that is just, now you're talking customer service, but
Yeah.
I got sold a bill of goods that then they couldn't deliver on, and nothing erodes trust. And oh, by the way, that story gets shared out faster than anything else. So you absolutely have to consistently deliver not only on your messaging, but on your delivery, on your service.
Right, right. I'm curious with that final team that you're working with, and it sounds like they're going to deliver on a lot of what you need. Did they also tell you what they couldn't do? Like,
Oh,
did you
yeah.
offer anything? So
Oh,
they
yeah.
were open about
Yeah, yeah. Billy was, when he showed up yesterday, big smile on his face. Oh, I love your new home here and whatever. And I said, yeah, I've been really having problems with, Wi-Fi out here. And he laughed. He goes, oh, that's what happens when you move to rural Arizona in the woods. He goes, we all have bad Wi-Fi up here, or, internet, but we can get you up and running. We can get you
that.
the
That's
best we can
terrific.
possibly get you. You know what I mean? He
That
wasn't
I
over
think that
promising
is
anything.
terrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of building rapport over acknowledging what you can't do that I think, really eludes many businesses that, we are so trained, I think, in our society and certainly as marketers to promise the world, to encounter people that have big goals, and of course, we wanna champion those goals, whether it's about having a fast internet connection or about a foolproof vaccine that's going to work better and more quickly than anybody had ever imagined. And I think the problem with that is that we build on foundations of false bravado that sometimes work out when we get lucky, when businesses get lucky, when public health commissions get lucky, when our customers get lucky. But we don't always want to get lucky. Sometimes we just want to get confident, and I think that is the problem in there. I mean, we were talking earlier about public health and vaccination, and certainly that's kind of the big topic right now. What I have learned, what I've seen kind of over the past year is that in so many ways, people were signing on to promises and false bravado, and we wanted to hear false bravado about the rollout of vaccines or how quickly this disease was going to go away, and those are nice promises until we fail to deliver on them. And then the problem is people lose confidence in the institutions and organizations and individuals making those promises. The way we build trust, like I talked about consistency of message and in our voice, but I think it's also through the vulnerability of acknowledging what we know and what we don't know, and then how we're going to fill that gap, how we're going to continue to grow our knowledge. And there is no shame in that. And I think we see how that plays out, whether it's an organization that has made some enormous mistake. Maybe the CEO has said something that is just completely erroneous or completely boneheaded, or maybe they've been caught in more of like a PR snafu. Maybe they kind of doubled down around supporting different social issues like Black Lives Matter or Me Too, only to realize that those external problems were problems internal to their organization as well. We've seen that play out time and again over the past year where organizations said that, these different topics were very important to them, only to realize that they needed to address them internally too. And I think the smart companies have said, wait, okay, we have this problem too. Well, let's first acknowledge it. Maybe let's apologize if we did something stupid, if we've cultivated a culture that we don't want to support, that we don't want to champion. Maybe it's a culture of discrimination of which we weren't entirely aware before. Let's acknowledge it. Let's apologize for our role in it and then demonstrate accountability. Let's tell people what we're going to do to not perpetuate that problem. There's no need to hide that kind of public evolution away. I think, in fact, the smartest organizations are the ones that are able to put a stake in the ground, say what's important to them, make their values visible, and then act as a beacon to other organizations to say how they're going to continue to evolve, to make good on those values. And I think that nature of acknowledgement, apology, and accountability, we talk a lot about transparency and authenticity, but this is what it means to be transparent, to not hide away the bad stuff, but to embrace the human stuff. I think that's what brings us closer to our audiences and also makes them champions of our own progress. And we've seen how that has played out in different contexts with different degrees of severity. It was a few years ago that the TED had to come to terms with publishing on their platform that was not always high quality and was in some cases erroneous. So TED, obviously, everybody loves TED Talks and watching those videos. Some of the folks that don't always love watching those videos are scientists that are seeing faulty science get a great place on a stage, get a lot of attention on a stage because maybe it's pithy. Maybe the speaker is just incredibly invigorating and energetic, but wrong. And TED has had to come to terms with developing a new policy around when that is the case. There was a talk a few years ago that uh, it was revealed that the science was not really the what the speaker was describing was not really science that reflected the consensus of his peers. And critics started engaging with TED and saying, this is wrong, but you're giving it a platform. And they had to come to terms with the fact that sometimes the content they publish is wrong, or in other cases, it becomes outdated by new innovation and new discovery in the industry. That's not a reason to hide away the talks that they originally published or the information from which those industries originally came. But instead, they need to figure out how do they acknowledge, maybe apologize for fostering confusion in an industry and give it better context. So they brought their critics closer to say, yes, we realize this is a problem. We don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. What do you think? Let's prototype in public. Let's try out different ways of framing misinformation so that people understand why they should not always take it credibly. And they ended up describing their content through different methods with adding more notes to it at the bottom by introducing new content types that put information in better context. Also by flagging videos if somebody was watching it so that they would already know that, okay, this was a fine talk for when it was published, but new information has come out. And after this video, I should immediately go to that other more current and up to date video. So they developed ways to acknowledge the problems, put it in the right context, learn from it so that their audience could learn from it. And
Yeah.
by taking that approach of acknowledging and asking for ways that the public could hold them accountable to growth, they brought their critics closer so that scientists that were previously calling them out and castigating them instead could champion the results. I think that that's such a marvelous example for many businesses that when you're kind of caught doing the wrong thing or encouraging the wrong thing or maybe with problems internal to your organization, that's not the time to hide. If anything, that's the time to be there in public and say, "We were wrong. Let's work together to get better." And I think that brings many of our critics closer.
Margo, in your experience, what is like the most obvious forehead slapping mistake that brands make that really erode trust in them that you see? And maybe they're just so close to it that they don't even see themselves doing it.
When brands deny problems or ignore them and hope they go away, not only are they being short-sighted and stupid, they're also being rude and disrespectful to their audiences, either externally or internally. If it's employees that are raising a problem, they're being disrespectful by by not being willing to meet their audiences where they are and work to improve the problem. Um, I think they're also being stupid because they're missing out on an opportunity to change and to change some of their fiercest critics into their bravest and most enthusiastic champion. And we see that play out a lot right now. We've been seeing it play out a lot with Amazon, where employees have complained about how they don't feel comfortable. They're not allowed to leave the line or to leave the shift or to walk away from their delivery trucks if they have to go to the bathroom. So instead, they're resorting to going to the bathroom right there on the line, and that
And
is
they've got cameras set up watching them, and they're trackers. They're monitoring every step, and they say, Jerry, you just missed out on 7.35 minutes in your afternoon shift because you were in the restroom. I mean, it's madness, isn't it?
it's madness. It's bad business. It's bad humanity, and when we do something like that, when a business does something like that that is dehumanizing their employees, not only is that a problem, it's an HR problem before it becomes a PR problem. They're treating people poorly. And now the media knows about it. Twitter knows about
Yeah.
it. Folks involved in congressional oversight know about it. And when Congress people have tweeted about it, Amazon's response was not to sit humbly and accept criticism, but rather was to double down on their mistakes, to deny that employees were doing that, and then to respond to those tweets from Congress people in a way that was trolling, not the
But
kind of tone that we would expect from a big
Margo,
business.
these are smart people. I mean, Amazon doesn't hire dummies, stupid people. How do they get themselves in these kinds of situations? I mean, maybe it's just easier from the outside looking in where you and I can say, well, God, what are they thinking? And maybe it's the fog of war internally, but how does this happen to a company like that?
I think fear and the fear of repercussions, the fear of facing that kind of reality, and also false bravado. Amazon, for all their efforts to innovate and to offer wonderful ways to engage with content, to search through content, to have instant product research at our fingertips every time you pull up a new category and see 8,000 options within it. For all of their focus on the future, they are very much mired in corporate history and in a history of how business used to be. Because certainly, like we can look back to the 80s where it would have been unheard of for a business to engage in a way that was vulnerable, to acknowledge their mistakes. I mean, that was the era where everybody wore shoulder pads to seem bigger than they were. And
The puffer fish phenomenon. Yeah.
I mean, every business wanted to seem bigger and more infallible and more powerful than they were. It's only been in the past several years where we've seen a trend away from that, where we see the power of small businesses starting out on Kickstarter, and then many of whom, after they become successful, keep engaging on Kickstarter to launch new products, to engage directly with their audiences, because they want to be on that same level with their
Mhm.
audiences and they value the contributions. We see how also when big giants like Procter and Gamble or General Mills, when they acquire different mom and pop brands, whether it is Annie's or RX Bar, you don't see any big corporate branding around them. They encourage them to kind of keep the same tone, keep the same look and feel. So you don't realize that RX Bar, this little granola bar company that I think was started by two college roommates, is now backed by one of the largest corporations in the world. The packaging has remained the same. It looks cheap and homegrown by design because they want to seem smaller than they are. It makes the brand more accessible to people. But I think Amazon is still stuck in a culture of false bravado where, yeah, we might say that they are too big to fail. The bigger issue, though, is are they too big to quit? Not necessarily for many people that have said, "This isn't right for me. It doesn't feel good to shop here." So many people believe in voting with their dollars and choosing companies to support that align with their values, and I think for many consumers, shopping at Amazon is fast, it's convenient, we trust their delivery, but we don't necessarily trust their values and that their values align with ours.
Mhm.
So I think we can see how for a brand like them, false bravado will only take them so far. Their weakness is not acknowledging vulnerability and not being able to admit when they've messed up.
Yeah.
And they've messed up big.
So, how can you help with your new book? And again, it's Trustworthy: How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap. You've got really three main sections in this book. You've got voice, volume, and vulnerability. Can you take us through those and how this book can be of real service to some of these brands or to all brands that are trying to continue to build and maintain trust with their colleagues, with their consumers, and with the communities they serve?
Well, my goal in writing Trustworthy is I wanted to make sure that anyone that picked it up, whether you're a marketer for a Fortune 500 or you're kind of wearing all the hats in a small business, whether you're a copywriter or a creative director or a designer, or you work mostly just on social media, I wanted people to be able to pick up this book and see themselves, see their own needs reflected in it. So the organizations that I collected, the stories that I collected, the interviews that I conducted were with a really broad variety of people and organizations. And I think you can kind of see that through the book. You hear from folks at the New York Times, from the FBI, local elections boards, Old Navy, Banana Republic, Zoom, America's Test Kitchen, smaller businesses, larger businesses. There's a Europe's largest sex toy retailer, back to back in the same chapter with the FBI, because it turns out they have to deal with very similar issues of trust and empowering their audiences.
And delivering on their promises, right?
Yes, yes, and helping people understand that the information they present is empowering and valuable and accurate,
Yeah.
whether, whatever type of information you're trying to pull from those experiences. So the framework that you mentioned, the three parts of the book focus on the patterns that I was seeing and talking with people in all those different organizations. Like, what were the common threads for if they are building trust, if they are sustaining relationships, how are they doing that? And it turns out it comes down to voice, which we've already talked about a lot, that consistent, persistent, familiar way a brand engages visually and verbally through all of its touch points. The second section focuses on volume, the volume of information they share. And we look at that through different windows from MailChimp and America's Test Kitchen and Crutchfield Electronics, as well as the British government and how they present information to help people help themselves.
Well, what's the
Um,
biggest finding you've found in this idea of volume? Because to me, sometimes I'll push back on that and say, it's not the amount you're putting out, it's the quality of it. So, how do you balance that volume with actual quality content?
I couldn't agree with that more. It turns out there is no one right answer for how much your brand should say, whether it's the length of an article or a blog post or how many images should be in a gallery. There is no one right answer, but we know that content empowers people. More content is not always better content. And I found that the best way to determine what is the right amount of content is that you know you have enough when your content helps people make good decisions and feel good about the decisions they make. And you can measure that if you're a retailer with the rate of product returns, the amount of time people spend on the site, if they're spending a lot of time because they're confused or they spending a lot of time because they are reading every word that you are publishing and they're getting to the end of your really long pages and then clicking to read more. If it turns out they do all that to bolster their own sense of confidence that they know what's going on and they feel like they can make a good decision, that's a great thing. And as I said, you can measure that then if they are able to buy products and have a really low rate of return on those products. So we can look at that through the lens of voice and volume, and those really kind of come to the forefront then in the third section around vulnerability. So how brands weigh the risk of being transparent and engaging authentically with their audiences, whether that is coming back from a mistake and determining what to do next, or if it's about making their values visible and showing their audiences who they are. One of the organizations that I profile there is Penzeys Spices, and I love that
Love Penzeys
organization.
spices.
Yeah.
And they
Are
have
you much
great
of a cook?
storytelling. My wife got Penzeys and gets them all the time when, got the newsletter and started showing me the storytelling that they do. And it's really, really quite amazing. They do a very nice job.
I love them because I'm not much of a cook, but I support their mission. Their values align with my values.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, so many of my friends and family have gotten birthday and Christmas presents from them. And I guess I'm proud to say, not only do I love digging into their story as a storyteller and a content creator, but also I guess I'm kind of in their newfound target audience in that way. For folks that aren't familiar with their story, um, around 2016, 2017, kind of in the wake of the last big presidential election there, Bill Penzy, the owner and CEO, he took to
By the way,
Facebook.
we can say it. Trump won.
Yes, yeah, no spoilers there.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But well, he took to Facebook to say, and I don't know if he actually mentioned Trump's name at all, which was interesting kind of editorial choice there. But he took to Facebook to say, we here at Penzeys, we see what's going on in the world of politics. We don't agree with it. We don't agree with a candidate who opposes immigration, who spouts a lot of racist ideology, because we're in the business of food and cooking, and we believe that cooking is an act of love. And before you say, "Hey, Spice Boy, stay in your lane," this is our lane because so many of our family favorites, so many of the big highlights of the American cookbook came here on the backs of immigrants. And frankly, so many of the spices that we
Yeah.
source and sell come from war-torn regions. When you're buying Aleppo pepper and singing its praises, know that we have a big military presence in Aleppo. The US has a place there. Our military has a place there. Our politics have a place there. So therefore, we the people have a place and a perspective on that as well. And and his statement, it was a pretty long post. It it raised a lot of eyebrows. It got a lot of headlines, and they lost a lot of customers. But over time, something happened where they expanded their audience. They ended up gaining a lot of customers every time he made a similar kind of political post because people like me were suddenly saying, "Well, I don't seek to buy a lot of spices, but hey, here's a company that aligns with my values. I like what they're saying. I'm going to share that message. I'm going to spend my dollars there as well." And what we saw that was very interesting, so Penzeys sales were up, I think 50% year over year. They jumped considerably every time he posted something like that. We saw how their closest competitor in the Midwest, the Spice House, took a very different stance. So after Bill published that post, the head of the Spice House, who turns out to actually be Bill's sister, I don't think they have the best family relationship there. Uh, she took to Facebook and their social media and said, "You know what? We believe that business should stay out of politics. We have no place in politics. So here's a discount code, all caps, no politics. Use it next time you come in." Business didn't do so well for them. And we can see that, especially in the current day and age, in the wake of Citizens United, that the idea of business staying out of politics is an antiquated idea. And in fact, staying out of politics, staying above politics, is a position of privilege that doesn't reflect the situation that is oftentimes the situation of your target audience that is very much affected by politics. We see how that's playing out in Georgia. We see how that plays out for lots of large organizations like Nike supporting different social campaigns, or Coca Cola, or Apple. When businesses get involved in politics, it turns out that's exactly what many people in their target audiences want from them. The last Edelman Trust Barometer included information that said, I think it's something like 66 or 68% of consumers want to be able to vote with their dollars. They appreciate hearing the values and political perspectives of the brands with whom they choose to surround themselves.
Well, you think
It was
about it,
something.
Margo. I mean, businesses this day and age with social media and their ability and all the different channels they have for reach, they are media companies. The best ones are media companies, first and foremost, communicating to their customers how they can serve them and how they can improve their lives through the products or services they offer, but also attaching those stories to other stories, current events, celebrities, politicians, that are going on. So to act like business has no say in politics, I think is sort of cowardice. It's like I'm in this for the bottom line, and I want to offend the least number of people as possible. And being brave and sharing your values and being vulnerable. And I want to talk to you just a little bit about that word vulnerable in just a minute. But being brave, like Bill was, is saying, no, this is what we stand for. And so, yeah, he may call out some initial customers that don't buy into that, but he's going to attract, and did, so many more. And so I don't think businesses anymore can say that they are above it, because the really good ones and the very, very powerful ones are media companies as well as businesses, with this day and age. Now, going back to that word vulnerable, of course, Brene
Mm.
Brown popularized it, and everyone says you got to be vulnerable. And boy, when I see it, and I'm talking to leaders at brands, they're like, yeah, I hear you, Park. I know I'm supposed to be. To me, it almost needs to be reframed. And you talk about this, the bravery of your values. Be brave enough to share your values. And I think a lot of people think of vulnerability as being weak. I know what you're talking about. It's being transparent. It's showing you that, look, I don't got it all figured out. I'm going to help get your internet to this place, but I can't get you here. But I think that is more bravery than being vulnerable. In the process of being brave, you are
Right.
vulnerable. You know what I mean? I'd like to see people reframe that just a little bit, because so many leaders push back on that idea of being vulnerable. They think it still shows weakness.
Right, they push back, and at the same time, they embrace terms like transparency or we want to be authentic. Well, authentic to what? What
Right.
is it that you want to reveal about your brand? Because if you're simply building up another veneer, that's not vulnerable. That's hiding in public, hiding in plain sight. But I agree with you. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Vulnerability is the strength that comes with confidence of knowing who you are and not wanting to hide that away simply to make a short sale, but rather the vulnerability that it takes to engage a customer and build long-term loyalty, to build a longer term relationship. That requires showing who you are and how you are, so that you are, this gets back to the idea of respect, so that you're respecting your audience enough to let them know, to empower them with the information of who you are and what makes your business unique.
Margot, I will finish up with this, and then I'd love to get your top one, two, or three things that people could do right now to start kind of measuring their trust, or to even amping it up. But I say in my book, Brand Bewitchery, and I'm a huge believer in this, is that stories deliver a truth that creates the trust. Now, it could be a negative story, and you got to be talking about something that is bad, but it's truthful. That's going to create trust. Even if it puts you in a bad light at first because you blew it, tell that story. It's going to create the trust. And of course, if you can tell the story too of how I can make your life better and deliver on that with your products or service, that indeed creates the trust. But first and foremost, you have to be truthful in your business storytelling, brand storytelling, sales storytelling. So to build that trust, Margo, what are one, two, or three things that our listeners can do right after this show to start working on their trust barometer?
Think first and foremost, I didn't say it first. I think the ancient Greeks did, carved over the temple of the entrance to the temple in Delphi. It said, "Know thyself, nathi sotum." Know thyself. So first, know what makes your organization unique, who you are, who you're not, and who you'd like to be. Because so much of branding is aspirational. So who do you want to become in the hearts and minds of your target audience? Know that, so that you can turn to that kind of message architecture, that hierarchy of communication goals, to say, you know what? We're focusing on being innovative, telling a story of innovation, telling a story maybe of being responsive or reliable. And that's why we're investing in white papers, or that's why we're investing in live chat, because it's so important for us to be responsive. That helps us prioritize our time and talents and the budgets of everyone involved in telling those stories. I think beyond that, beyond knowing yourself, be consistent to that message, especially now. Now is not the time to introduce big changes. And then finally, meet your audience where they are. That doesn't mean if you're in the business of public health communications, or if you're in the business of selling hardware or software, or if you're in the business of selling other kinds of services, it doesn't mean dumbing down what you do. It doesn't mean abandoning jargon to tell your story. It means meeting your audience where they are and explaining more. Give them your vocabulary. Help them learn to use those words so that they can ask more informed questions, so that they can feel not this sense of another brand that's being condescending to them, but rather the experience of engaging with a brand that's teaching them to better understand their world, better evaluate a product category, and make better decisions. Because when we empower our audiences, that's how we build their trust. That's how we build their confidence, first in themselves, and then in the organizations or the people that help get them there.
Fantastic. Margo, how can our listeners meet you where you are to find your new book?
You can find my book, Trustworthy, everywhere books are sold. Certainly go out and support the local small businesses, the local bookstores in your community, or any of the other booksellers that I guess we've mentioned today. And you can find me on Twitter at @mbloomstein.
M. Bloomstein. Well, Margo, thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to this edition. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Share this episode with a friend, family member, loved one, colleague, boss, and start working on your trust barometer. You may already be at the top of that barometer and it may be going wonderfully, but you have someone show up in your door and say, hey, now it's time to change our logo. Maybe it's not time to change your logo. Maybe it's time to just keep doing more of what you're doing. At any rate, I just think with terrific insights here on how to build trust through the stories you tell, through the stories that you deliver on with your customers. And if I can help you with that story, visit me over at businessofstory.com. You know I've got tools, tips, techniques, and talent like Margo there to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. I sure hope you'll join me next Monday, right back here again. And until then, remember that the most important story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.